is like no place else.
Wait, you can't recycle the bag? You have to throw it away.
Proper recycling keeps it that way for everyone. Bags tangle in machinery and can bring sorting efforts to a halt.
No bags.
Trash the bags and keep our recycling program moving forward.
No, Mom, look, no plastic bags.
Do your part to keep our recycling bag-free. Trash the tanglers or return them to participating retailers. For more information, visit TampaBayRecycles.org.
official local planning agency for the cities of Tampa, Temple Terrace, Plant City, and unincorporated Hillsborough County. The Planning Commission provides innovative leadership and long-range vision that contributes to the creation of a thriving, prosperous community that offers opportunity, fairness, and choice in how we live, move, learn, work, and play. For more information about the Planning Commission, please call 813-272-5940. Follow us on social media or visit our website at planhillsborough.org.
What?
Good afternoon and welcome to the August 14th, 2023 regular meeting of the Hillsborough County City County Planning Commission. We thank you for attending this meeting. Your comments and participation are encouraged. For those attending in person and wishing to speak on any agenda item, please sign the register at the rear of the room and turn off any devices that may be a distraction. To minimize feedback in the audio, all online participants in the meeting will be muted until it is their opportunity to speak. Planning commissioners should unmute themselves to indicate that they would like to speak. Please be sure to state your name at the beginning of your remarks for the benefit of the clerk. There will be an opportunity for members of the public to provide comments. When your name is called, you will be unmuted when it is your turn to speak. Please wait until the chair calls on you to begin speaking. State your name at the beginning of your comments and adhere to the time limits. If anyone has difficulties or is watching via HTV and would like to provide comments to be included in the record for local government hearing, please email them to planner@plancom.org. For action items, the meeting will be conducted as follows. The agenda item will be introduced. Staff will give their presentation with a 15-minute time limit. The applicant will be given the opportunity to make a presentation with a 15-minute time limit. Following presentations, members of the public may address the Planning Commission when recognized by the chair. Public comment will be heard for 3 minutes per person. The applicant will be afforded a 3-minute period for rebuttal or response. Planning commissioners will ask questions. Public comment will be closed. Then upon a motion, a second, and discussion, vote will be taken. And with that introduction, I'll ask everybody to stand and join me. I'll lead us in the prayer and the pledge of allegiance. Heavenly Father, we come before you today with praise for your mighty power and guidance. We thank you for this day and thank you too for the many blessings in our lives, for our great country and for the opportunity to live in freedom. We ask your blessing on our leaders, and we ask that you give each one of us here today the wisdom to make the right choices so that our decisions will be in the best interest of the people of Hillsborough County. Amen. Salute. Pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. And with that, I'll ask the clerk to go ahead and do roll call, please.
Good evening, Bernstein. Bowden.
Here.
Buzzer. Cardenas.
Here.
Fernandez.
Here.
Andy.
Here.
Press.
Here.
Vogt.
Here.
Soria.
Here.
Horton.
Lori Valencia for Michelle.
Rodriguez.
Here.
Joseph.
Here.
Thank you. You have a quorum.
All right. With that, I have the approval of the minutes for the June 12th, 2023 and July 10th, 2023 minutes. I hear a motion. Sure, Mr. Fernandez.
I like the motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
All right. I'll second that motion. All right, I got second. Motion approved by Commissioner Fernandez, second by Commissioner Soria. Are there any discussions, questions from the commissioner? Not seeing any. I'll ask the clerk to do a roll call vote on that item.
Bowden.
Yes.
Cardenas.
Yes.
Fernandez.
Yes.
Andy.
Yes.
Kress.
Yes.
Vogt.
Yes.
Soria.
Yes.
Joseph.
Yes.
Motion carried 8-0.
Thank you. All right. Public comment. Item number 2 on our agenda is public input for items not on the agenda. I don't see any right now. We have anyone sign up online. public comment. So we will move on to action items. And our first action item is 3A, proposed bylaws amendment, applicant in-person attendance provision. And the presenter is Melissa Zornita.
Good afternoon, Melissa Zornita, Executive Director. Based on discussions at your April retreat, as well as the regular meeting on May 9th, we proposed a bylaw amendment per your direction requiring in-person attendance on all agenda items that are for decision action, whether publicly or privately initiated. The applicant or their designated representative would need to be present for those items. It outlines the failure to comply with that, and what would occur would be a resulting automatic continuance of the item. And it further specifies that an applicant's ancillary consultants or additional representatives could be virtual, as well as the public may participate virtually. Additionally, it reiterates under Section 6 of the bylaws that attendance by planning commission members are expected to be physically at the meetings. The bylaws amendments are to be approved by a 2/3 majority vote of the members. And with that, planning commission's recommendation is that you approved the proposed bylaws amendment. Be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. We didn't have anybody sign up for public comment on this one, so I will turn it over to the commissioners for discussion, questions, or comments on this item. I'm not seeing any motions from anyone at this time, so I'll go on ahead and close the public comment on this item and open it up to motions from the commissioners on this item. Yes, Commissioner Lau.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move approve the proposed bylaw amendment, item 3A, applicant in-person attendance provision.
Right, we have motion of approval by Commissioner Lau. Is there a second to that motion? Anybody? Commissioner Soria?
I'll second the motion.
Right, second to that motion by Commissioner Soria. Is there any discussion or questions from commissioners on this item? Seeing any at this time, I will ask that we do a roll call vote on this item.
Bowden,
Yes.
Cardenas,
Yes.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Handy,
Yes.
Kress,
Yes.
Logue,
Yes.
Surya,
Yes.
Joseph.
Yes.
Motion carried 8-0.
Thank you. All right.
If I could just mention that we will begin informing applicants of this with the September cycle of plan amendments. We'll try to notify all the applicants who applied before this was in place, but we'll certainly be enforcing it starting with the September cycle of plan amendments. So just wanted you to know that, because I think there are a couple of folks today who are virtual as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up on the agenda, action item 3B, Golden Aster Scrub Nature Preserve Land Management and Land Use Plan, Consistency Review for unincorporated Hillsborough County, and the presenter is Diego Guerra.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Diego Guerra, Planning Commission staff. Again, this item is an action item. A resolution is in your packets for your vote. And Mr. Bernard Kaiser of Hillsborough County will be presenting the Golden Scrub Nature Preserve Land Management Land Use Plan update.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bernie Kaiser. I'm with Hillsborough County Conservation and Environmental Land Management Department. And what I'm presenting to you today is a brief summary of the Golden Aster Scrub Nature Preserve Management Plan update. I will try to keep this brief. I'm sorry. So the management plan has to be updated every 10 years. Yes, it's the cover page. Okay, just a little brief background. The preserve is 1,181 acres in size. It was purchased back in 26 May 1995, and then subsequently sold to the Preservation 2000 and Carl program. It was purchased because it was one of the last places where the Florida golden aster had been found, and the plant was heretofore thought nearly extinct until it was found on that site. As it was turned over to the state, the state requires management plans every 10 years. The first one was in 1997, the second in 2008, and this is the next update, 2003. A little bit behind. We were behind beforehand, and then COVID kind of accelerated getting behind schedule. So the site and the management plan, how it works with the comprehensive plan is it addresses three areas: conservation and aquifer recharge element, recreation and open space element, and the future land use element. Under the conservation and aquifer recharge element of objective 13, protect and conserve significant wildlife habitat and ensure no net loss of essential habitat, and 14 of maintain populations of listed species throughout reserves and management of habitat. So golden aster scrub supports natural and semi-natural habitat communities for listed species that are known to occur in the region, and it contributes to the overall terrestrial biodiversity of the region. You can see on the map that's just a rough picture of it, closer in picture of the site, showing it's divided into three parts, mainly by TICO easement. And it's part of the Bullfrog Creek Water Management, Bullfrog Creek Watershed. And if you remember where it is on there, I don't have a pointer on here, I'm sorry. So just try to remember where it was. But it is fairly isolated and it is surrounded by dissimilar land uses. So that pretty much precludes any expansion of the preserve in any one direction, any of the four major directions. So objective 15 of the conservation and aquifer recharge element is minimize the spread of exotic species and control such species, and continue to increase acreage of natural preserved land and ensure protection of these lands. This little thing here that I can't read everything. The update of the management plan identifies needs and presents what we've done for the monitoring of the site for exotic flora and fauna, maintain recently completed restoration projects, implement future restoration projects, and implement long-term prescribed fire management of the site. There are a number of habitats on the site, and the map you see there is a GIS-based map of all the different habitats. And on the right is a table with the acreages of each of the types of habitats. Just a few quick pictures of some of the habitats on the site. The xeric, or higher and drier upland habitats on the site, are oak-dominated scrub and scrubby flatwoods. And then the lower two that you see, sandpine-dominated scrub and hardwood successional forest. Those are two areas of what a site tends to look like as fire suppression creeps in and they begin to get overgrown. The two at the top, the oak scrub dominated and the scrubby flatwoods, is kind of like the ideal appearance for these types of upland habitats. And then the other upland habitats that you find on a site are what are called mesic upland habitats. These are ones that are drier than wetlands, but not quite as dry as the xeric upland habitat. And the largest of these on the site is mesic flatwoods that are spread throughout the site. There are also wet flatwoods and hydric hammocks on the site. Wetlands on the site are mostly marshes, depression marshes. There is some wet prairie in the northern part of the site, not much though. There's a couple of bay gull habitats on the site. And there's also one small sinkhole down in the southwest corner of the eastern portion of the site. The site also has the headwaters for the Kitchen Branch Creek, and this drains into a canal that is then connected to Tampa Bay. So facilities and resources on the site. We have done a number of public outreach events over the years, and then I'll go touch briefly on the existing recreational facilities and the proposed recreational facilities. So public outreach and educational events, there's been a few over the years. We've increased the number because we've gotten more staff to do that sort of thing. It did come to a halt sort of in 2020 with COVID, and 2021 and 2022 there were fewer events because of the logistics and staffing issues. The recreational facilities on the site, there is a marked hiking trail, which you can see in tan on here. There is a parking lot and kiosk at the end of East Bay Road. And then there is a picnic pavilion further into the site. And that's pretty much it for facilities on the site. It is sort of more of a primitive site, if you will. And there was one proposed extra facility, an additional facility on the site, and that was part of the Greenways Trail, the Adamsville Greenways Trail, and you can see the proposed outline in blue on the map there. And to the right, you'll see tables of soils and natural habitats that would have been impacted had it gone through this area. Conservation and Environmental Lands Management doesn't support this being the route for it, and it's our understanding that this route has been withdrawn and a different route is being considered. But we're leaving it in the management plan for our own, because we feel it should stay in there. Then exotic plant control. Most of the exotics out there are Kogan grass. There is old and new world climbing fern, Brazilian pepper. Those are the big ones. And you can see that over the years, it was like general spraying here and there, and then it got more specific over time. And that's because our mapping abilities got a little bit better over time. And these units, management units you see on here, are the management units that the site has been broken up to for for prescribed fire reasons. And then here is something about the fire maintained habitat. As I think most of you know, almost all habitats in Florida are fire maintained by some level of frequency of fire. So we have provided in here a table of how many acres are within the FRI. The FRI is the fire return interval. And what that means is it's the recommended fire return interval for that habitat. Say for Music Flatwoods, it should be every 3 to 5 years. For scrub, maybe 25 to 75 years. And it varies with the different habitats. So we get an analysis as we're developing a draft of how many acres are within the fire return interval of these habitats and how many of them are 1 to 5 years outside of that fire return interval and then beyond 5 years. So a big reason you can see that a lot of stuff is outside of the fire return interval, and a big reason of that is because of the location of the site. The eastern boundary of it is I-75, and there's a lot of urban areas to the north, the railroad tracks to the west, and there's also urbanized areas to the south of it. So it is rather hemmed in. For these plans, we have 2-year and 10-year planning goals, and for most of the 2-year planning goal is to continue maintaining and controlling the exotics and establish more long-term monitoring of the site. We now are starting to get the staff with the expertise in the botany of the site and the various fauna on the site, so we can start doing more in-depth analysis of what's there and see how our management efforts are affecting populations of these species, and also to begin the process of trying to get up to speed on the prescribed fire part of the program. And the 10-year plan is basically an extension of the 2-year plan. It's a continuation of the various monitoring programs we established, a continuation of the prescribed fire program. I mean, we would like to get everything within the right fire return interval by the end of the 10 years, but that's probably overly ambitious goal. Okay, I told that to be brief. So do you have any questions?
No one signed up for the public comments on this one. So I'll turn it over to for questions or comments. This one, Commissioner Haley.
Thank you.
Next questions.
Thanks, Bernie. You and Ross Dickerson's staff have done a great job of managing this site.
Oh, thank you.
Quite familiar with it. Sadly, I think there are no more scrub jays to date.
We've not seen any in quite some time.
That's what I thought, yeah. So, I wondered what the status, and on the pictures that you showed of some of the overgrown scrub with the sand pines and the oak, were those before pictures or is that?
Those are what the condition of them is right now. Those two overgrown areas. Those are down near, both of those areas are down near the large borrow pit in the southeast corner of the site.
Okay, on scrub soils.
Yes, mostly scrub soil, yeah.
Are they slated for restoration?
We're debating whether or not to do that because it would be an extremely difficult smoke management issue because of the interstate. And if we were to cut everything down, there's really no way of getting it off the site without further damage to the site by bringing large logging trucks in through the sugar sand of the scrub. And I also don't know if East Bay Road would be able to handle that kind of logging traffic. So we're not sure how we're going to approach that, but we don't want to start something halfway and then like decide, well, we can't do anything more with it. So right now it's not getting any worse, so to speak, but the big issue is managing it with fire because of the interstate and all this, the site. That's not me.
Okay. All right, thank you for that.
Okay.
Are there any other questions or discussions? Yeah, Commissioner Bob.
You mentioned the Greenway Trail. He said the Greenway Trail
Yes.
was initially slated to have what happened?
Well, it had been on the map for quite a number of years, and our department was always concerned about it because it would have had to go through the preserve, and there would have been a lot of impacts to the preserve, either through paving the trail and then secondary impacts from extra traffic through those areas. And the trail layout that was presented, that was theoretically on the map, would have impacted a number of wetlands. The wetland mitigation wouldn't likely have had to have been done on site. And that may have also resulted in loss of further uplands. And it would have been a cascading effect of they started converting uplands into wetland mitigation areas. Well, now there are gopher tortoises on these upland areas that you're converting. Now you're going to have to relocate those. And so there were a lot of different potential negative impacts. The plan sort of, the Greenway plan also sort of, I don't want to say implied, but there was this understanding that maybe they're going to be able to use TICO right away as well. And TICO, as far as I know, they never approached TICO. And the footprint of the plan, of the route that I have shown you, it would have caused some significant impacts to our site.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any more comments or questions? Not seeing any at this time, and I will go ahead and close the public comment and open it up to motions. Since an action item for commissioners on this item. Let's see, too much excitement here.
Forward the motion.
Right, Commissioner Scoria.
Approve the Golden Astor Scrub Nature Preserve Land Management and Land Use Plan update.
All right, we have a motion of approval by Commissioner Scoria, second by Commissioner Lau. Questions or discussions? Not seeing any at this time, and I'll ask the clerk to do a roll call vote on this item.
Yes.
Cardenas? Hernandez?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Press?
Yes.
Vogt?
Yes.
Soria?
Yes.
Joseph?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
All right, next up, we have 3C, FY 24 through FY 29 capital improvements and capital improvements program and capital improvements section, schedule of projects update for unincorporated Hillsborough County, and presenter is Tampa Bay.
Good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen, the Hillsborough Planning Commission staff. This is the commission's review of the proposed FY 24 through FY 29 Hillsborough County Capital Improvement Program and the schedule of project update. This is an action item and a resolution is provided for your vote. The review was conducted in accordance with Chapter 97 of 351, which requires the Planning Commission conduct an annual review of the county's capital improvement program. Chapter 163 of Florida statutes requires that the schedule of projects, which is a list of projects that address levels of service and adopted in the comprehensive plan, be updated on an annual basis as well. The update would replace the existing capital improvements section schedule with the schedule in your packets. The update is accomplished by ordinance and does not follow the standard plan amendment process. As such, Planning Commission staff also conducted a review of the schedule of projects during this process. The review examined the CIP and schedule for consistency with the county's comprehensive plan, as well as plans of adjacent jurisdictions. Displayed is a summary of the CIP projects, which are placed into 8 program areas. As you can see, the largest groups in terms of funding are water enterprise, solid waste, and transportation. The total proposed funding amount for FY24 through FY28 is $3.37 billion for 318 projects. This slide depicts the percentage of projects addressing levels of service. And as you can see, 91% of the projects do address levels of service. The first step in reviewing the CIP and the schedule of projects for consistency was to take a look at the projects identified by the county that address levels of service and seeing how these compare to the priorities outlined in the capital improvement section. Capital improvement policy 1.1.8 states that that funding should first be expended on projects that eliminate public hazards, improve safety, maintain levels of service, and eliminate existing deficiencies before expending funding on projects to serve future growth. And as you can see, over 70% of the funds are slated for projects that either eliminate deficiencies or maintain levels of service. Additionally, utilizing geospatial data, the Planning Commission staff looked at all the projects which were analyzed to ensure consistency with the related future land use policies and the One Water chapter policies pertaining to the urban service area. 51% of the funding is for projects within the urban service area. Projects in rural areas include replacements and renovation of existing facilities, parks, and trails. The reason for the funding expenditures in the rural area being higher than past years is due to a couple projects related to water enterprise and solid waste down in southeast county portion of the county. None of the projects encourage growth or sprawl in the rural area, and no water or sewer lines are planned for the rural area either, which is supported by the Future Land Use Objective 1 and One Water Chapter Policies 1.3.1.3 and 4.3.1. The schedule, the capital improvement section objective 1.5 states that the public expenditures for infrastructure and facilities in the coastal hazard area should be limited and minimized, which is, with this being said, Planning Commission staff used, again, geospatial information systems to analyze all the projects with available geospatial data to determine their proximity to the coastal hazard area and determine that only 12 of the projects are within the coastal hazard area. These projects serve existing development, renovate, replace existing facilities, or enhance public access to natural areas, and would be considered a minimal construction and ensures that county property and expenditure is not subject to unnecessary risk, and therefore the CIP is consistent with the capital improvement section and the coastal management section objectives concerning coastal hazard area. Ladies and gentlemen, Planning Commission staff recommends Planning Commission find the county administrator's recommended FY24 through FY29, capital improvement program and capital improvement schedule of projects consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the county's comprehensive plan. This concludes my presentation. Myself and county staff are available for any questions you may have.
Right, we didn't have anyone sign up for the public comment for this item either, so I will turn it over to the commissioners for questions or discussions. Much excitement in the room. I will then go on ahead and close public comment on this item and open up to motions from the commissioners.
Motion, FY 24, 29 CIP and CIS schedule of projects consistent with the Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan and forward this recommendation to the Hillsborough County Board of County Commissioners.
I second. All right, motion of consistency or approval, I guess. Approval or consistency?
Consistency.
All right, motion of consistency finding by Commissioner Fernandez, a second by Commissioner Bowden. Are there any questions, discussion, comments from commissioners? Not seeing any at this time. I'll ask the clerk to do a roll call vote on this.
Bowden?
Yes.
Fernandez? Yes. Andy?
Yes.
Press?
Yes.
Logue? Yes. Saria?
Yes.
Joseph?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. All right, next up, we have item 3D, FY 24 through FY 28 Capital Improvements Program, CIP and Capital Improvement Section Schedule of Projects Update for City of Temple Terrace. Presenter is Diego Guerra.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, Diego Guerra, Planning Commission staff. This item is the Planning Commission's review of Temple Terrace's FY 24 through FY 28, Capital Improvement Program and Capital Improvement Section Schedule of Projects. This is an action item and a resolution is provided for your vote in your packets. The review was conducted in accordance with Chapter 97, 351, which authorizes the Planning Commission, which requires the Planning Commission conduct an annual review of the city's capital improvement program. Chapter 163 of Florida statutes requires that the schedule of projects, which is a list that addresses level of service and adopting the comprehensive plan, be updated on an annual basis. The update would replace the existing schedule with the schedule located in your packets. The update is accomplished through ordinance, which does not follow the standard plan amendment process. Planning Commission staff also conducted a review of the schedule of projects during the process of the CIP review. The review examined the capital improvement program and the schedule of projects for consistency with Temple Terrace's comprehensive plan and plans of adjacent jurisdictions. Depicted as a summary of capital improvement projects, there are 9 program areas which were identified to consist of 197 projects. The total FY 24 through FY 28 funding amount is approximately $66.5 million. Of note, this list is this was the CIP that was made available in early August. There may be some slight variations, but overall, this is the final draft of the CIP. This chart depicts the same information as the previous slide, with the percentages by program area broken out. As you can see, the largest groups in terms of funding are for public safety, water, sewer, and transportation. Staff also analyzed the capital improvement program with respect to the funding source requirements in the comprehensive plan. Capital improvement policy 1.5.5 states that the general fund should not be used for those facilities dedicated revenue sources, such as potable water, wastewater, and solid waste. After review of the general fund expenditures, staff found that none of these types of projects relied on general funds. Capital improvement policies 1.5.10 and 1.5.11 state that all projects within the first 3 years of the city CIP be funded with committed revenue sources. These include ad valorem taxes, gas taxes, and user charges. And staff reviewed the funding sources and timing, found that the CIP funding was in accordance with these requirements as well. This slide shows a breakdown, of level of service projects, type, level of service project types identified in terms of level of service priorities, as outlined in the CIP, in the capital improvement section as well. A total of 89% of the projects address replacement of facilities or elimination of deficiencies, and capital improvement objective 1.1 states to establish and employ an annual process of updating the capital improvement section in order to guide the construction of public facilities, eliminate existing deficiencies, repair, replace for obsolete and worn out facilities, and accommodate future growth while maintaining the economic level of standards. Planning Commission staff examined with respect to the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan, and on the slide are just a few of those policies that are also found consistent with, the CIP is also found consistent with. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes my presentation. Planning Commission staff recommends the Planning Commission find the city's proposed FY24 through FY28 capital improvement program and capital improvement section scheduled projects consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the Terrace Comprehensive Plan. I am open for any questions you may have. I did invite city staff for this presentation, but I don't believe any did.
We didn't have anyone in the public sign up for a comment on this item, so I will again turn it over to the commissioners for questions or comments, discussions. This item. I'm seeing any. Go ahead and close public comment and open it up to motions from the commissioners on the site. That is.
I'd like to make a motion to find FY24, FY28 CIP, and the CIS schedule of projects consistent with the Temple Terrace Comprehensive Plan and forward this recommendation to the Temple Terrace City Council.
Second.
All right, we have a motion of consistency finding by Commissioner Fernandez, and a second by Commissioner Lau. Any questions, comments from the commissioners? Not seeing any at this time. I will ask the clerk to go ahead and do a roll call vote on this item.
Bowden?
Yes.
Cardenas?
Yes.
Fernandez?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Kress?
Yes.
Loke?
Yes.
Saria?
Yes.
Joseph?
Yes.
Motion carried 8-0.
Thank you. All right, next up on our agenda, we have action item 3E, section 27-156, Land Development Code Text Amendment, accessory dwelling units in East Tampa, and the presenter is Emily Phelan.
Emily Phelan, Planning Commission staff. This is LDC amendment for East Tampa dwelling unit, with accessory dwelling units in East Tampa. It was privately initiated and part of the January 2022 cycle. Currently, accessory dwelling units are not allowed in East Tampa. With the proposed language, it would allow accessory dwelling units as a special use one. Currently, ADUs are only allowed in Seminole Heights and near the Lowry Park area. The proposed LDC text amendment is consistent with multiple aspects of the comprehensive plan. The request continues to streamline the development review process and ensures municipal codes remain sensitive to the changing trends and needs of Tampa's neighborhoods. It allows greater flexibility for homeowners to develop accessory dwelling units. And the proposed changes would increase housing opportunities, promote mixed income neighborhoods, encourage infill development, and promote a housing pattern consistent with the compact city form strategy. And the Planning Commission staff recommends that the proposed land development text amendment be found consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the Tampa Comprehensive Plan. This concludes my presentation, and city staff is here as well.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm LaShawn Dock, Development Coordination. And Emily did a great job explaining this text amendment. This amendment, what it would allow is a change to 27-156, the use table. So it would add the accessory dwelling units as a special use one, which is an administrative review, and it's for the properties located within the East Tampa overlay. So this is a footnote which would be added to that use table. And just to go over briefly with you, this was presented in December. You just did not have the actual text language, but You've heard this before with the East Tampa overlay with the remainder of the text amendment that went through. So this is scheduled for City Council first reading on August 31st. And I'm available if you have any questions.
I don't think we did actually have someone sign up for this one. All right, start with the online person then. Is Kim Headland available?
Oh, she's the applicant in case there are questions.
Okay, all right, cancel that then. We'll go to the in-person people. We have Dana Crosby Collier.
She's city staff legal if you have any questions.
Okay, well then we don't have anyone signed up then. That was it. So I will turn it over then to the planning commissioners for questions, comments, and discussions on this item. Oh, sorry, Mr. Press, couldn't see you.
Thank you for all your work on this. I wish we could discuss citywide with ADUs, but I understand you probably need to kind of piecemeal it. So I just wanted to say I'm in full support of this.
Yes, it is something also that's being worked on through publicly initiated amendment as far as citywide.
Oh, great.
But East Tampa wanted to run it through with their language just to make sure. So, absolutely.
Commissioner,
what's the timing on the citywide? Or were we realistic thinking of it being completed and eventually ended up in front of council?
I can't say the actual date it would go back before council. I know it is being handled through the city planning department. So I'm sorry, I can't give an exact date as to when it would go back to council.
Commissioner Love.
Can someone keep me straight on this one? When we heard this in December, did we ask this to come back with a wider net, citywide approach, or is this a different accessory dwelling unit case? Because if I recall correctly, it was East Tampa, and we had asked as a body that it come back before us with a wider net all across Tampa rather than limited in scope to just one neighborhood.
I actually think that that was an amendment before the East Tampa one. I think that was more narrowly focused, and you all requested that it have a citywide approach, which I think is what city planning is working on. But then in sort of the interim, this update to the East Tampa overlay was privately initiated.
Yes.
And to go ahead and allow it in that neighborhood while the citywide approach is still ongoing.
If I may, I believe the idea being with the request running with the East Tampa overlay language is just not knowing the timing on the publicly initiated one. So they just had concerns. They just wanted to make sure that what they proposed is being adopted now. This was an effort that started several years ago, probably sooner than that. So the residents really wanted to get this adopted.
Okay. I'm sure on that.
Any other comments, questions, discussions?
Follow-up question for staff. Or this was privately initiated or privately initiated. Was there any thought process of moving it to a wider, casting a wider net with this?
Yes, actually, it was always a thought, and we expressed that with the applicants, but they had a desire to move it forward on their own.
So
we had this text amendment in process. We had West Tampa overlay. That was a privately initiated amendment. And they were kind of running hand in hand. They wanted to give an update to their overlays. And then after that, you know, although it was running concurrent, the overall looks citywide. We just didn't have an exact date as to adoption.
So agree that East Tampa, nice area for what we're proposing here, but from a policy perspective, we feel like it's the best course of action to support this in a piecemeal fashion, because it's very similar to what was before the body last time, before our body last time.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
I could just add just some insight. I think they're trying to control, the privately initiated is trying to control the timing.
Right.
Which is always a big question mark. So I kind of, it's kind of unfortunate and a little time consuming to do it piece by piece, but I understand the pragmatic view of the neighborhood.
I'm in favor of it. I'm not in favor of the policy of looking at happens. I'm just not. And we have the word equity in all of our stuff, all of our packages. we're talking about rolling this up in equitable fashion, we're really prioritizing one neighborhood over another one. And I know the board has changed a little bit since I was here in December. We have some new faces. But one of the concerns of the board was rolling this out in a piecemeal fashion. And I think Commissioner Cody, something about, it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. Maybe we roll this out all at once. So I don't know why we would prioritize one neighborhood over another one at this point, regardless of how we feel about the policy. If it's not incorporating, if we're not addressing the wider issue of where it's appropriate and when it's not. Otherwise, we end up with piecemeal developments like we're getting channel side, where one building comes, one building comes, one building comes. We're changing these parcels one at a time versus addressing the entire concept at once.
Nice. Any other, I see, who's got some comments in the back.
Stephen Benson, City of Tampa. I just wanted to add, I believe that based upon that direction from the Planning Commission, that is what led to initiating the amendment to the comp plan, to clarifying that the comp plan does not restrict ADUs, outside within, it allows it in any residential district. The zoning code, however, has existing restrictions that we're slowly trying to remove with council's ultimate direction. When we brought back the recommendation that we do it citywide, the response from council was not favorable. So we are modifying that again, and we're going to try again. But since we don't really know the timing of how long that's going to take, we let these private amendments move forward because really the applicants are who are controlling the language, not staff. We provide comment and work with them, but these proposals are coming from the community themselves, not from staff.
Great, that's really good insight.
Thank you.
Yeah, didn't it come from city council in the first place that they wanted it?
Wanted something.
Yeah, that wasn't it originally coming from them. Like, I don't see why we're now going to the piecemeal on them.
I apologize, I can't hear the question.
I said, what, didn't it come from council originally, the initiative to want this to happen? That was.
So this particular request that's before you currently is a privately initiated amendment, and so this was not council directed.
Yeah, no, but I'm talking about the overall of it,
The overall discussion of ADUs, yes,
So
initially.
So they liked it, but then instead of doing it all at once, there was something there.
I think there were other items that were grouped with it, and maybe Stephen can clarify, but I don't think it was just that discussion on its own.
Yes, Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you. It seems to me that South Tampa and New Tampa are doing their best to try to not have ADUs. That's what it sort of feels like to me. We have East Tampa now, West Tampa, Seminole Heights, Lowry, but it's an obvious gap missing somewhere. I wouldn't be shocked if next we see the North Tampa, Bel Air. We'll have, everybody in the middle of ADUs, but our two north and south ends of the city without it. I am also for citywide. It's too bad we're going this way, but if it's privately initiated, I think it's going to be tough.
Comments? Commissioners? Seeing any going once, going twice, then I'm going to go ahead and close it. Oh, yeah, Commissioner Love.
I was going to make a motion, sorry.
Oh, all right.
I'm just trying to be efficient.
I'll go ahead and close the public comment on this one and open it up to motions. Wow.
I move that the board finds the proposed LDC text amendment relating to accessory dwelling units in East Tampa consistent with the Tampa Comprehensive Plan and forward this recommendation to the Tampa City Council.
All right, C motion by Commissioner Love, there's a second. Anyone else? All right, second to that by Commissioner Fernandez. Any comments, questions from commissioners? Seeing any at this time, I will ask the clerk to go ahead and do a roll call vote on this item.
Bowden?
Yes.
Cardenas?
Yes.
Fernandez?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Press?
Yes.
Lowe?
Yes.
Saria?
Yes.
Joseph?
Yes.
Motion carried 8-0.
Thank you. All righty, next up on our agenda, we have item 3F, Section 27 Land Development Code Text Amendment, Tampa Heights Overlay District Development Standards. And the presenter is Emily Phelan.
Emily Phelan, Planning Commission staff. This is Tampa Heights Overlay Development Standards. It was privately initiated in part of the January 2022 Land Development Code Text Amendment cycle. The proposed text amendment is a creation of an overlay district for residential and non-residential development in Tampa Heights. As part of the residential, some of the things that they are proposing were orientation, alley access, residential driveways, parking, and accessory dwelling units. And then part of the commercial was to allow on-street parking, encourage side and rear parking, different parking standards as well, and parking offsets. The creation of the design standards is supported and consistent with multiple aspects of the comprehensive plan. Allowing accessory dwelling units will encourage a variety of housing types and ensure an adequate supply of housing is available for Tampa's population. The plan recognizes the design role of alleys in defining the traditional character of Tampa's neighborhoods. And the plan also encourages development compatible with Tampa's traditional character in context of the neighborhood. Planning Commission staff recommends that the proposed land development code text amendment be found consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the Tampa Comprehensive Plan. This concludes my presentation. The applicant is online, and city planning and city legal staff are here as well, and the applicant will do his presentation first and then city legal. Brian.
Yes, thank you very much. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. I would like to go ahead and do a share screen, or will you be running the presentation locally? There we go. Good afternoon, members of the Planning Commission, and thank you for your time today. I apologize that I have to do this virtually, but I have a back injury that's made it difficult the last few days to move around. Otherwise, I would much prefer to be here in person. My name is Brian Seal. I'm a board member of the Tampa Heights Civic Association and a former two-time president of the organization. I'll refer to it as THCA for shorthand during the presentation. I'm proud to represent them today and ask for your support in the creation of the Tampa Heights Overlay District. The main purpose of this initiative is to encourage affordable, walkable, and transit-supportive urban design. The overlay will do this through targeted initiatives to preserve green space, retain on-street parking, promote vehicle access via alleys, allow accessory dwelling units, and reduce commercial parking minimums. I'd like to give a little bit of a history of this effort. The proposal before you today is a long history. When the Tampa Heights Local Historic District was created in 2000, it only included about a third of the neighborhood due to the concentrations of contributing historic structures. However, the remainder of the neighborhood still has the same urban design and development pattern, although just not the concentration of remaining historic structures. Tampa Heights was promised to be next in line following the creation of Seminole Heights form-based code overlay. Due to city resources year after year, that process was continually delayed. In 2019, THCA board members met with city and planning commission staff about this topic. We were told the only way for it to be accomplished was by privately initiated text amendment, so we accepted the challenge. Our land use committee reviewed existing overlays in the city of Tampa and held focus groups to create the first draft, which was submitted to the city in July 2021. This initiative and the code amendment itself have been well vetted among the public. Starting in July 2021, the effort has been posted on the THCA website, discussed in every monthly meeting, and included in every email communication to our over 800 subscribers. In January and March 2022, HART hosted transit-oriented design charrettes at the Tampa Heights Community Center. Out of that effort, the consultant's recommendations for commercial parking reductions were directly incorporated into this proposed overlay. In June and September 2022, THCA presented this text amendment at publicly noticed City of Tampa meetings. In October 2022, THCA hosted a public forum dedicated to this proposed overlay. Our board members canvassed the neighborhood, placing this door hanger at every residential and commercial property. We also placed yard signs throughout the neighborhood advertising this meeting and the effort. It included meeting details and website links to all of the overlay information. The forum itself was simulcast via Zoom, recorded and uploaded to YouTube the following day. During all of these stages of public engagement, valuable community feedback informed the evolution of this overlay. Because of our transparency and community engagement efforts, we've received strong support. Our online petition has been signed by 256 people, 90% of whom live or work or own property in Tampa Heights. The Tampa Downtown Partnership, whose special services district covers portions of Tampa Heights, has given their official support to the creation of this overlay. Walk Bike Tampa, a nonprofit advocacy group who was instrumental in the creation of the city's Vision Zero plan, recognizes that the provisions of this overlay can help create a safer city for walking and biking. They have endorsed this overlay. To put Tampa Heights in context, why does it need an overlay? It's one of the only central city neighborhoods not protected by a comprehensive overlay. You can see on the map here where our historic district is, but the amount of the neighborhood at the left out is highlighted in orange. You can see our neighbors in Seminole Heights, West Tampa, Ybor City, East Tampa, Hyde Park, and downtown, which isn't shown on this map, but downtown has its own section of the Land Development Code in Tampa, all have special provisions to protect their unique urban fabric. Tampa Heights does not. To put it in further context as to why we're doing this, Tampa's been under tremendous pressure from rising housing costs. Not only does a short supply of housing affect its cost, but the car-dependent development pattern creates a further burden on residents. You can see here that in 2019, before the post-COVID population boom, Hillsborough County renters already spent more than 50% of their gross income on housing. The expense of living in Florida is comparable to California and New York, which are typical punching bags for cost of living issues. Similarly, the cost of home ownership has skyrocketed in the past several years, outpacing much of the rest of the country. Tampa Heights has been among the neighborhoods experiencing the highest level of home price appreciation. It's become incredibly unaffordable to live in this neighborhood. Another key motivator for this overlay is pedestrian safety. Improving pedestrian safety is the other key goal. Car dependency of Tampa Bay has made it one of the most dangerous places for pedestrians. The Smart Growth America's Dangerous by Design ranking, we've been in the top 10 for the past decade. It's a very poor accolade to have. Zooming in, it's not only is walking more dangerous regionally, it's sadly less convenient in an urban neighborhood like Tampa Heights. We're far behind similar neighborhoods in our peer cities. In the zip codes encompassing downtowns and core neighborhoods, walk score rates Tampa a 63, while places like downtown St. Pete has a 77 and Miami is a stellar 91. You can see some other cities around the country that the Tampa Bay Partnership compares to in a regional competitiveness report all have far greater walk scores than Tampa. This simply shouldn't happen in a neighborhood adjacent to downtown Tampa like Tampa Heights. So something needs to change. And as a community, we want to take ownership and leadership of the solutions. Among those solutions are allowing ADUs in Tampa Heights. They can be a quicker and easier solution to increasing the housing supply where it's needed. We need more small, affordable housing units. This is why municipalities around the country, including Tampa, have been working to remove barriers to their creation. On the prior agenda item, you all discussed why this wasn't rolled out citywide, or why this is done neighborhood by neighborhood. We in Tampa Heights feel strongly about this issue and have for years. And when we started this, allowing ADUs was not necessarily on the city of Tampa's radar. Now that it is, that's fantastic. But because of the difficulty in a citywide rollout, we want to make sure that these happen in Tampa Heights and that these are allowed to be built. And why is that? That's because ADUs are compatible in Tampa Heights. When you look at the historic development pattern here, you have a lot of pre-existing ADUs, all indicated by the arrows here. Garage apartments and backyard units are common built form, and this overlay will make it easier to build more of them. Another primary motivator for our solutions is walkable design. Traditional neighborhood design, or TND, is recognized for providing excellent walkability and safety. Yet most of Tampa Heights is covered by the city's outdated suburban-based zoning code. Even the US DOT and Federal Highway Administration tout the benefits of TND practices. They recommend traffic calming through on-street parking and deem front-facing driveways as inherently unsafe. We want to incentivize the usage of our extensive alley network for this reason. Here you see some examples of residences, both old and new, single family and multifamily, that were wisely designed with traditional street engagement. Note the amount of green space, shade trees, access to sidewalks, and the amount of available on-street parking in front of these properties. In contrast, look at recent projects that did not value walkability and street engagement in the same way. There was no requirement or incentive for them to assess their relationship with the surrounding urban fabric. Valuable green space and on-street parking is lost for the decades-long life of these buildings. Another major goal of this overlay is to spur reuse and redevelopment along our commercial corridors, such as Franklin Street, Florida Avenue, and Columbus Drive. Highlighted in these satellite images, you can see all of the vacant lots and surface parking contained on the key corridors of Tampa Heights. It's simply unacceptable and a poor use of land to have that much open space. Small and mid-sized properties sit vacant, yet similarly sized properties in downtown to our south and Seminole Heights to our north have been activated thanks in part to parking reforms. It's a huge barrier to redevelopment if the only way to meet excessive parking minimums is through expensive structural garages, buying surrounding surface lots. Property owners should be able to use the abundant on-street parking and provide the off-street parking spaces they think that their business needs. Lee's Grocery is a perfect example of what we want to replicate. It's a valued gathering point for the community with the best pizza in Tampa, but there are a few places like it, and they thrive without a single off-street parking space. Let's make it easier for places like Lee's to exist. This effort didn't come out of left field. The values we're attempting to codify were identified back in the 2003 Tampa Heights Neighborhood Plan, which City Council officially adopted. It was just never given a stick or carrots to be put into code. Furthermore, there are a variety of policies in the city's comprehensive plan that encourage the traditional form of our Tampa Heights urban village. These policies simply haven't been enshrined in Tampa's land development code. Finally, the codes proposed with this overlay do not exist in a vacuum either. They mirror successful efforts in other neighborhoods, including the changes to East Tampa's overlay, which the Planning Commission and City Council have approved. It's time we codify the values we espouse in Tampa Heights: walkability, safety, and affordability. This proposal does so in a pro-development, incentivized manner. We humbly ask for your support and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Stephen Benson, City of Tampa staff. Now we're going to go through some of the specifics of what is being proposed under the overlay. As was stated before, this was part of the January 2022 privately initiated cycle of text amendments to the Land Development Code. The proposed boundaries for the overlay district are shown on the screen. The dashed pink line shows the boundaries, and then the solid green line within those boundaries is the comparison to the Tampa Heights Historic District. The Historic District is remaining intact. Those regulations will still come into play on top of this and will likely remain further restrictive in many ways than the overlay district, but the boundaries are there for comparison. The borders are I-275 on the east and on the south side. And the western boundary is Tampa Street up to Palm Avenue, then up Ola Avenue to Ross, and then up North Boulevard to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, and then back to I-275. There are two primary sections of the code that are being amended with this package. The first is section 27-156. That's the general use table. That's the same type of amendment that you heard on the previous item. What is being changed, however, is in addition to East Tampa, which was just talked about, Tampa Heights is also being added. So it's further amending that footnote in that table. What is unique about the Tampa Heights Amendment and also the East Tampa Amendment as well is the Tampa Heights Amendment will have the same conditions for ADUs for approval as the general code. However, there are two distinct differences that are being brought forward that would only apply to Tampa Heights. The first is that ADUs within this overlay will only be required to provide on-site parking if the living space, the ADU's actual living space, is greater than 600 square feet in size. The general code requires on-site parking for all ADUs regardless of size. And that is still currently the case with East Tampa because they did not want to change that when they brought theirs forward. The second is the minimum occupancy for an ADU within the overlay shall be no more than 2 unrelated occupants. The general code limits occupancy to no more than 2 either related or unrelated. So the general code is a little bit more restrictive. That was a proposal, I believe, actually from a council member that has not actually made it into the general code yet. But we felt that it was a good idea because it's acknowledging small families, like a couple, maybe with like a newborn or a toddler. So no more than 2 unrelated acknowledges those situations which are likely to be common. So these are the 2 ways where ADUs within the Tampa Heights overlay are intended to have different conditions for approval. In addition to that change to the general code, this package is creating a new section of code. It's section 27-244, entitled the Tampa Heights Overlay District Development Standards. There are 3 components of the overlay: residential development, commercial or mixed use development, and then some regulations specific to the North Franklin Street area, north of the interstate, obviously. So for residential development, this is a summary of what the strike through and underline says. We've tried to create kind of a cheat sheet for you so you could see exactly what it's doing. Lots of record, so lots that historically maybe have been non-conforming. If it's an existing lot, at the creation of the overlay, it will be considered conforming, so you'll be able to develop it. The overlay provides an incentive to orient new garages on attached units away from the street. And by attached, we mean like a duplex or a triplex or a series of townhomes. Right now, that requires a design exception. So this overlay says you don't have to go through that process. If you want to orient your doors to the side of the lot or to the interior of the lot, however, if you elect to take advantage of this relief, then garages need to face interior to the lot. They can't face the street. The third item is that this discourages driveway proliferation and encourages the use of alleys. Again, if the applicant is seeking relief under the overlay, then there are standards for the size and spacing of driveways. That is intended to address some of the photos that were shown in the previous presentation where the entire lot at the street front has been paved and turned into a 50-foot long driveway. The fourth item is this allows maneuvering in the right-of-way in alleys, which now is not required as of right, or is not permitted as of right. The next is that on-street parking may be counted towards the requirement on site. So if you have a couple of spaces that are legal spaces, meaning there's no driveway that's been put there, that can count towards your on-site requirement, for instance, your visitor space. That's being additional relief that this overlay would be granting. The next is that this would allow for informally what we call 2-story garage apartments, which are very common in this part of the city and a lot of the historic parts of the city. It's the middle image on the screen there. This permits those without a design exception or a waiver. Right now, accessory structures are limited to 15 feet in height. So this allows you to go up to whatever the underlying zoning allows you to do for the primary structure. And then the last item is that porches may encroach up to 10 feet into the front setback. The general code does allow this, but it only allows you to go 8 feet. So if you do a bigger porch, we're not going to count it against your setback, in other words. For commercial and mixed use development, again, lots of record will be made conforming by this overlay district. The next item is that the overlay encourages new parking to be placed in the rear or the side of development, not in front. The word encourage is used because, again, if you're seeking relief under the parking reductions that this overlay is granting, then the parking shall comply with these guidelines for location. The third item is that those parking reductions will be for mixed use. You can essentially double count your spaces if it's a residential and a non-residential use up to a certain amount. The next is that very small commercial buildings, which are common in this area, 1,500 square feet, so very, very small. We are waiving parking completely for those very small commercial buildings on site. And then the last item is that bicycle parking offsets are permitted for up to 10% of whatever is required on site. This is similar to Seminole Heights and some of the other special districts in the city. And then the last requirement, the last provision is that on-site parking requirements for smaller projects fronting North Franklin Street, specifically only North Franklin, will have no parking requirement on site. So some of the structures that you see there in the photo are historic properties, but what this does is if, generally about a third of the block, if your development is a third of the block or smaller, 20,000 square feet of acreage or smaller, then there will be no on-site parking required. This, I believe, was an incentive to encourage more development like the development that exists there now. Aside from this, there's nothing else that's being changed for North Franklin. The general code still controls the height, the mass, and the scale. It is fairly limited. It's about 45 feet in height. So this is just a parking waiver, essentially, for that area. So this is the schedule. The application was received by the city in July of 2021. Review and revisions were made in the spring of 2022. This was workshopped with Tampa City Council in June of 2022. We have briefed the Planning Commission last year. A virtual public information meeting was held in October of last year. And then we're here today and provided a favorable determination from you today. We'll be going to Tampa City Council for first reading sometime in October, and then second reading, in September, and then second reading in October. And just staff's recommendation is that the overlay introduces new guidelines to promote the desired development pattern within the area and provides relief from general code requirements in exchange for meeting certain standards. Staff has analyzed the associated provisions and determined that these provisions are not unduly restrictive or burdensome and recommends adoption. I'm here as well as Dana Crosby Collier with the City Attorney's Office to answer any questions. Thank you.
Right. Got all the presentations, Emily? Right. We have quite a few people sign up in the public comment for this one. So I will start with online people before we run through the in-person. Virtually, we have first up, Brian Turnbull. Brian Turnbull online.
Hi, yes, this is Brian Turnbull.
Yes, you have 3 minutes, please.
Hi. Thank you. Yes, so as a Tampa Heights resident, I can vouch that the THCA did a great job of reaching out to the community and involving us in the overlay development process. I was at several of those meetings, and they're all very informative, helpful, and transparent. Again, as a resident, I want to express my strong support for the overlay district plan. This has been well thought out and put together and will go a long ways towards helping our neighborhood grow in a sustainable way that provides for a good quality of life through walkability and access, and still accessible to mixed income by increasing the available number of units. I really like to focus on the incentivized use of alleys, the use of allowing ADUs, reducing commercial parking minimums, encouraging commercial parking to be on the side or rear of buildings to improve pedestrian access, and making Tampa Heights overall less car reliant. So thank you for your time.
All right, thank you very much for your comments. All right, next up online, we have Edward Gregorovic.
Edward has not checked in.
All right, that's all we had online, so we can pick it on over to our in-person crew. And we will start off with Roger Linke.
My name is Roger Grunke. I'm an architect and also a sitting member on the Tampa Heights Civic Association Land Use Committee. The residents of Tampa Heights are requesting an overlay for the district which would increase the density of the neighborhood. What would the ramifications of this be? Density reduces the amount of infrastructure per capita as would be needed to serve a same number of people in a lesser density. The lengths of the power lines, the lengths of the communication lines, of sewer and water piping, all per capita is going to be far less. This means municipal economic sense. Density reduces the amount of road coverage per capita. This also means municipal economic sense. A larger population is enabled by density, and this would support stores of general daily needs such as grocery, pharmacy, postal service in a smaller geographic, thus increasing the economic viability for those stores. This means a healthier commercial economy. In addition, a large population surrounding a store increases the likelihood that patrons will opt for alternative mobility types to reach the store, i.e. An e-bike, golf cart, transit. Density also enables local transit, which is only economically feasible when a large number of people live in a geographically confined area. This means municipal savings related to road construction and maintenance. Density makes economic sense. But we are at a point in history where we need more than economic sense. Land use is the key to our survival. Today, fire continues to envelop over 5 million acres in Canada. 8 regions of Greece and Rhodes are ablaze. 93 people died in Hawaii over this weekend from fire. Wildfire smoke has blanketed the entire northeast U.S. The Gulf of Mexico has reached epic temperatures, and the coral reefs are dying. These are events not just out there. Our responses to these calamities is taking place in this room right here today. Your decisions will exacerbate climate chaos or help reduce it. We have five.
Thank you, sir. That's your time. Could you wrap it up, please, for us really quick? We got to move on to the next person.
The decisions you make here today, here and now, will determine whether we go forward, life goes forward in a humane way. The connection between density and ecological sustainability is unequivocally direct. Please support this request.
Thank you, sir. All right, next up we have Sandra Sanchez?
Yes. If I can get out of this. Good afternoon. My name is Sandy Sanchez, and I'm from the Armory Garden community, the home of the new beautiful Wheeler Brothers store. I had to throw that in. I have been following the Tampa Heights strategy for the overlay since their first presentation that I saw in August of 2022. Tampa City Council understood the language in the overlay and approved it to move forward. Besides the Tampa Heights neighbors, many of us from other communities had followed progress through their website, through their Facebook page, public meetings within their community. I'm not sure what kind of system notification that some people complained about, but with today's technology, you can hardly miss when something like this big is going on. It has not been a secret. Part of the Armory Gardens community, my community, half of it is under the West Tampa overlay. We appreciate that overlay because it protects the safety of our community and our quality of life. The City of Council understood the language when they approved the amendment to move forward. They understood clarifications would be needed, and it would be between the Tampa Heights community and Tampa's land development staff. It would be that collaboration that would give clarity to move the overlay forward. I ask this overlay to move forward, you to vote for it, to protect this community. It's important. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up, we have Carol Ann Bennett.
You don't know, sorry. Thanks. Hi, my name is Carol Ann Bennett. I'm a lifelong resident of Tampa. Both the city staff and planning commission staff find this amendment consistent, and I ask you to also support it. On page 1 of their report, staff says, quote, Tampa Heights is recognized by the comp plan as a primary urban employment, civic, and cultural center, and the creation of design standards in Tampa Heights is supported by the comp plan. The report goes on to say that, quote, the comp plan recognizes Tampa Heights separately as an identified urban village, in part due to the neighborhood plan from the 2000s, and portions of Tampa Heights are within national and local historic districts. The staff report also says, this plan will encourage development that is compatible with its traditional character and context of the neighborhood. This amendment represents a staggering amount of work by the Tampa Heights neighborhood, and they have done an amazing job. This was a very, very long, arduous process that took years. Even though I do not live in Tampa Heights, their meetings have been well advertised and were open to the public. The first meeting I attended was 1.5 years ago. As a neighborhood advocate, I regularly interact with residents all over the city, and they would all love to have something like this. I wish I had the skill and dedication to create something of this high caliber for my own neighborhood. In my conversations with people throughout the city, I see how much residents cherish the identities of their neighborhoods. And it is eye-opening to see the differences in what is cherished about each neighborhood. They are not all the same, but they do all have one thing in common. They all ardently want to preserve and protect the character of their neighborhoods. That character can change drastically from one neighborhood to the next, but the love of the particular and sometimes unique character of their own neighborhood is universal. I truly believe that sometimes builders and developers are their own worst enemies. Over and over again, residents tell me they wouldn't mind the new buildings and developments nearly so much if they just.
Those children have been moved, families have been moved to 37 different areas, schools inside of all of the country. What's happening is the diversity that was in our neighborhood, that was the thing that attracted us, is now being challenged, very much so. We believe that ADUs and the other areas that we talked about in this proposal is, if we're able, particularly residents like myself, who we raised our children, now we're looking at our grandchildren, great-grandchildren, we're not able to stay in our communities because of the values and because of the expenses of heating our houses. If we're able then to have the auxiliary units, our house is too big for me alone. I could do something, and other people who wanted to do that within my same neighborhood, within my same property, and be able at the same time to generate some income, which could help residents to stay in our neighborhood. The safety and the parking are equally important. Thank you for your consideration. Thank you for supporting us.
All right, thank you for your comments. Next up, we have Milos Sotos. Milo.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Camilo Soto. Good to see some familiar faces on the commission, and to those that I'm not familiar with, good afternoon, and thanks for volunteering. You are very, very appreciated for what you do here. I'm here as, I'm an attorney. I'm also an urban planner, both by education and by vocation, but I'm here as a citizen and as a resident of Tampa Heights. And I'm here to ask you all to support this, not only because you've seen the slides, both from Mr. Seal, Mr. Benson, it complies with the comp plan, the Tampa Comprehensive 2040 comp plan. But I also wanted to give you a little bit more of context, especially as it relates to the walkability of the neighborhood. something that my son and we enjoy. My little man, as I like to call him. He just started a Impella this past week. And one of the things that he loves to do, and we both love to do, is just walk around our neighborhood picking up trash with a little grabber. And as you heard here, there's an incentive in there to help incentivize developers to build or orient their garages towards alleyways. That'll make the neighborhood much safer. You saw, I think, 2 primary slides that Mr. Benson provided that kind of gave a bullet point summary of what the proposed land development codes here will do. And if you hear someone from the development community, I don't begrudge them, they're going to want to make their money, and it's totally their right. But if they complain about this overlay, it's because they're being lazy, uninspired, or uncreative with the way that they build or the way they develop in light of these proposed rules. Okay? I also have the good fortune and the pride to be the first draftee of this proposed ordinance and the proposed development code revisions. I had to kind of take a step back from the process while I was undergoing some medical treatment, but I am so proud to see how much this is going forward, how much the stakeholders have been taken into account, and I include the development community as a stakeholder in this. They've had an opportunity to chime in. They've had an opportunity to essentially whittle down what was the first draft, and that's okay. That's the democratic process. We take everybody into account for this. And so I think another additional point, especially as it relates to the ADUs, there's a state statute. Now, you guys are all probably experts on state legislative actions, but you're probably familiar with the past 25 years basically being an attack on home rule in essence, and kind of rolling back a lot of the home rule powers. As it relates to ADUs, section 163.31771 encourages the establishment of ADUs. And here is an area where the local governments and the state legislature are working hand in hand to help create ADUs. So that's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. All right, next up we have Matt S. Just gonna go with that. Yeah, Sync. Okay, I thought it was Sync, but I wasn't sure.
Oh, you're Good afternoon. I appreciate your time and your consideration of something like this. I'm a resident of Tampa Heights. I'm also a developer and landlord that has projects in the hopper on it. One of the big things about this is that the citizens of Tampa Heights took it on themselves to create something that they need and what they want. One of the big things about our neighborhood is it's walkable. We are so close to downtown Tampa. And so one of the big pushes on this is to utilize our alleys. And as many people know, if you don't utilize things, they often become abandoned. So by revitalizing and activating our alleys, we're actually introducing more eyes on that street to actually reduce crimes. Additionally, by taking the alley access to the rear, we'll have less curb cuts, and that will allow us to have cars parked on the streets to alleviate parking issues. But what's also been historically shown is that if we have cars parked on the streets, it actually slows the flow of traffic and makes our neighborhoods and communities safer. So one of the big pushbacks that people said is, we don't want the alley access. That is one of the most important parts of this, is that it preserves the lack of curb cuts and allows more parking on the streets to slow down traffic and actually allow us to have front porch communities. The 10-foot setback requirement, which was 8, actually incentivizes developers to create big front porches that can fit a table and you can actually eat outside. This is one of the hallmarks of living in a historic district, and that's more eyes on the street. So by doing this overlay, it actually allows us to reactivate streets, form a sense of community, and create safer environments. So as a resident, I'm super proud that the association and Brian Steele has run forward with this to push what the residents are actually looking for. There have been so many meetings, there's so much input, and it's just kind of nice to see democracy in use, which is like people are asking for it. They took it upon themselves to petition their elected officials to provide what they're asking for. So my request is that this board respects the request of the community and improves this. Thanks so much.
Thank you. All right. Next up, we have Stephen McElhaney.
Good afternoon, Board. I think there's a number of provisions in here where the relaxation of the code are appropriate. However, there's a state statute that governs anything that's more restrictive, and I want to read that to you. A county or municipality located entirely or partially within 100 miles of where either of the Hurricane Ian or Nicole have made landfall shall not propose or adopt any more restrictive or burdensome amendments to its comprehensive plan or land development regulations, or propose or adopt more restrictive or burdensome procedures concerning review, approval, or the issuance of a site plan, develop permit, development order, to the extent that those items are defined by statute 163.3164 Florida statutes before October 1st, 2024. The non-restrictive issues are not a problem. They want to relax the issue about, various development standards, ADUs, that's fine. But this, I believe, according to the attorneys, does not allow the more restrictive provisions. Previously, the city staff has indicated they didn't have sufficient staff to review and to process additional overlay districts. There was a provision also at the last hearing that the Tampa Heights district advocates were going to reach out to myself and to Mark Bentley personally to review this before it appeared in any public hearing. That did not happen. I believe there's also a provision in the code where they're talking about allowing for lots of record to be established in 2022. The city code specifically mentions 1956, and there were additional changes made to the city code in 1987, which created a huge number of nonconformancies. Neither of these was addressed. Previously, we tried a text amendment that would have corrected that instead of having to produce records going back to 1956, which would have made it much easier to deal with. Senate Bill 250 does not allow restrictive measures to be adopted in any provision whatsoever. So I would put that on your plate and request that those provisions, the restrictive provisions and covenants, be stricken from this provision. We'll be following up with city council as well. But as I said, the more relaxed standards that are contained in this provision and the overlay itself are not being opposed, simply that providing these restrictions regarding alley usage. They've already run into problems in West Tampa where alleys are required to be used for development. And then you have to apply to the transportation department to determine usability. I'd like to try to avoid that kind of complication going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right. Last but not least, we have Jeremy Kay.
Hard last name to pronounce. Good. Good afternoon, members of the Planning Commission. Thank you so much for listening to all of us. I know we've been a long agenda item for you all. So I'm going to be brief because so many of my neighbors have showed up to support this overlay district. But like so many of my neighbors, I'm a Tampa Heights resident. I support the creation and adoption of the Tampa Heights Overlay District and request the Planning Commission recommend and approve this text amendment. So we left South Tampa and bought our house in Tampa Heights because of what makes Tampa Heights special. It has a unique history and development pattern. I am fortunate to live within the historic district. I actually live in one of the houses that was in Brian's presentation, showing an example of an ADU within the neighborhood. But the rest of the neighborhood outside of the historic district has no protection from adverse development practices that erode the character of and the safety of pedestrians in our neighborhood. In my opinion, the overlay district will foster safer, better, denser, more affordable development that fosters and preserves the characteristics of the neighborhood and the kind of interaction between neighbors that makes our neighborhood so special. I'm proud to support this initiative, and I hope that you will recommend approval of this amendment. Thank you all.
Thank you. Right. That was it for our signed up public comments. Did the applicant want to provide a response for. Well, thanks for no. All right, then I will turn it over to our commissioners for comments and discussions, questions on this item. Yes, Mr. Bennett.
Thank you, sir. I was curious, with all the talk of the walkability, what is the city's plan for sidewalks in the area? I'm bringing this up because I lived at 2 different residences in South Tampa, and I'm not sure if this is still policy, but if the house gets ripped down and rebuilt, they have to put a sidewalk down for it. Well, what that created in my neighborhood was unusable, wasn't very usable because every other house had a sidewalk and then there'd be obstructions in the way. So I'm looking especially at the north end of this overlay district. So what is sort of the plan? Because I see a lot of old houses that look to me like the same tear down rebuilds. Is there a plan to connect the actual pedestrian pathways?
That is still the requirement with Stephen Benson, City of Tampa. That is still the requirement with single family development, that the sidewalk along the right of way be installed and connected to adjacent ones if they exist. If that is not feasible for any reason, there is an option to pay an in lieu fee. There has to be an engineering reason, but you still have to pay. Previously, that in lieu fee was determined that it had not been increased in a number of years, and so the actual cost on the city's side to build the sidewalk was orders of magnitude above and beyond what the fee was, and so I believe it was last year, if not the year before, that City Council updated that fee and then cleaned up some of the loopholes in that language. So it's not going to necessarily fix the fact that people are creating, inverse gaps in sidewalk, but it hopefully will allow us to fill in the teeth a lot more quickly because the in lieu fees will be generated that will go back into filling those gaps, because that's all that money can be used for, is to fill gaps. So.
Discussion items or questions? Commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Henry.
I just want to say I'm quite familiar with this neighborhood, and I applaud the citizens and the community for being so supportive of what sounds to be like a very positive thing for your neighborhood, and I support it. And yes, Lee's Grocery probably has the best pizza in town.
Yes.
And no park.
Yeah, probably guess I'm in full support of this, and our organization did support it as well. And as far as the restrictions go on development, they seem well positioned as incentives to me. So I think that I don't see that would be an issue moving forward.
I'll say I would like to commend staff on supporting the less than 600 feet of accessory dwelling unit not requiring a parking space. And I think that underscores my previous point about the development of ADUs piecemeal. I think the East Tampa folks would really like that in their plan in the overlay district, and I think it makes it much more equitable, shall we say, as we roll that out, not piecemeal. The second question I would have, possibly for staff, if you could reach into your crystal ball, what are some, other than the reference to the alleys and the expanded use of the alleys, from a development standpoint, what are some of the other provisions in here that may get the development community smarter? We didn't really hear from them very much. From your perspective, what would some of those provisions be?
I think that there have been a series of significant changes to the language. And the last round of changes, I think, really addressed maybe a lot of that. That's why it's probably not entirely clear in how we presented it what exactly could be a problem. And that is when the parking reductions were incorporated, which I don't think was originally part of the overlay, but when that was added in, parking reductions for pretty much every type of use in one way or the other, that became an incentive that could then be leveraged to encourage design standards. And so this isn't really requiring design standards for every single development that comes in. What it's saying is if you're taking advantage of a parking reduction or a waiver and you want it to be administrative and not have to go to council to ask for it, then here's some criteria that we're putting into place. You have to meet this criteria in order for staff to be able to approve that. If not, it's got to go to council through a PD or through a variance to be approved. So it's evolved over time, and I think that might be the concern.
That's what I was reading it as well. It was quite clear. Thanks.
Discussions. Seeing any at this time, then I will go on ahead and close public comment on this item and open it up to motions. Yes, Mr. Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion, find the proposed LDC text amendment relating to the Tampa Heights overlay district development standards consistent with the Tampa comprehensive plan and forward this recommendation to the Tampa City Council.
And we have a motion of consistency finding by Commissioner Fernandez. Here, a second. Second by Commissioner Surratt. Any questions or comments from the commissioners on this item? Not seeing any, then I will ask the clerk to do a roll call vote on this item.
Bowden?
Yes.
Cardenas?
Yes.
Fernandez?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Kress?
Yes.
Vogt?
Yes.
Surya?
Yes.
Joseph?
Yes.
Motion carried 8-0.
You. Right, that was our last action item, so we are moving into agenda item number 4.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Yes. Doesn't matter. Okay. All right, we will go then to item 4B, because 4A was canceled. 4B is unincorporated Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan Future Land Use Section Update. And the presenters are Melissa Leinhardt and Andrea Papinger.
Good afternoon, Andrea Papinger, Planning Commission staff. Melissa Leinhardt and I will be presenting an update to the future land use section for an unincorporated Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan. So for this presentation, we're going to start by doing just a quick background on the comp plan and the future growth projections, and then we're going to go to what we've heard from the community from both community meetings and our survey results. And then from there, Melissa Leinhardt is going to go through some inward growth and outward growth policy concepts. These concepts have been presented at multiple community meetings. The staff is hoping to get direction from the Planning Commission on how to move forward. So you may have seen this slide before on some of our past presentations. Just for a quick overview, the comprehensive plan envisions future growth, provides consistency, prioritizes funding, and protects resources. It's a legally required document that we typically update every 7 to 10 years. So currently, we've updated most of the comprehensive plan for unincorporated county, and the future land use section is one of the last major pieces of the puzzle. After the future land use section update, the leftover pieces are the public schools and the definition sections. Apologies, more technical errors. So the point of this update is just future growth through 2045. The latest population projections for unincorporated Hillsborough County are going to see 350,000 more people and 107,000 more jobs, which is going to increase our demand for transportation, county services, schools, and recreation. So for this update, we're trying to identify how we should grow and where we should grow. So the map on the screen shows the urban service area in red. The urban service area pinpoints where current growth is focused and identifies the urban and suburban development and the rural areas. Currently, it is part of our adopted future land use elements growth management strategy, which has a goal that at least 80% of all population growth will occur within the urban service area. So as we continue to grow, we recognize that we are running out of land that is vacant, redevelopable, or developable within the urban service area. Currently, based on our January 2023 projections, we have 20% within those 3 categories. So Planning Commission staff did review the acres of developable and redevelopable land within the unincorporated urban service area, and our 3 cities, Plant City, Tampa City, and Temple Terrace. Total acreage is 51,077. Based on May data, out of that total acreage, 65% is in the urban service area for unincorporated Hillsborough County, and 35% is within the 3 municipalities. On the map on the screen is the developable acreage in purple and the redevelopable acreage in orange. That does exclude wetlands and other conservation areas. As you can see, most of this land is very small in size. There's few large lots left, and some of those large lots have entitlements, such as the Mosaic property or the water set in South County, or other associated constraints. So staff conducted a survey in March and April of this year. We had over 1,800 participants and over 32,000 data points from this survey. That 1,800 is significant because for a county of this size, a significant number of responses is about 500. We do have a more technical, detailed memo on our project page, but I'm going to go through some of the highlights that we've received from the survey. So one of our questions to the community was, what is a priority for you? We presented 9 priorities and asked them to rank their top 4. So the overall ranked priority is number 1 by 20% was preserve natural areas. Number 2 was infrastructure and development. 3, maintain agricultural and rural lands. And 4, a variety of mobility choices. We also included questions on our survey relating to inward growth within the urban service area boundary and outward growth outside the urban service area boundary. For inward growth, most important was the efficiency of existing infrastructure, and least important was a variety of housing types. So the next slide shows all the options available under that question, and we asked for participants to rank each answer choice out of 5 stars, with 5 being the highest or most important and 1 being least. And so it's important to notice that even though the variety of housing types is ranked as number 4 out of 4 options, 25% of respondents did give it a 5 out of 5 stars. So we do recognize that we need some option of choices for housing. So for the outward growth strategy, most importantly was minimize impacts to the environment. Least important was access to major highways. So we had 5 options for our outward growth outside of our urban service area boundary. Compatible land uses ranked number 4, and access to major highways ranked number 5th option, but we still had 32% of respondents give access to major highways a 5 out of 5 stars. So staff conducted a multi-pronged approach to our engagement. Besides the survey, we've had 5 community meetings and 3 project advisory team meetings so far, with some in-person community meeting options, and we have at least 2 more community meetings scheduled in November. Throughout these meetings, we heard very similar priorities. So some of the main themes that we've heard from residents are preserving our natural environmental spaces, managing traffic accessibility, especially during our peak hours of congestion, considering our current neighborhood character when we look at density increases, and the need for more affordable housing and a variety of housing types. We also heard from the community an emphasis on safety, not driving with other modes of transportation, and looking at our access to our emergency services and our mobility choices, which are currently limited. Our schools being overcrowded and residents wanting to be closer to their daily needs. Specifically in regards to the outward growth of the urban service area, the 4 main themes we heard from the community are maximizing our existing infrastructure, making sure any new development has services in place to support it, optimizing our current opportunities, so developing or redeveloping within the urban service area first, looking at stronger developer regulations to ensure they abide by the intent of the comprehensive plan. However, it is important to note that staff has had to balance the feedback we've received from the community with the provisions in the current state statutes that limit the changes that we can make with this plan update. And then the last theme that we heard for outward growth is protecting the environment and limiting new development, especially housing in our coastal high hazard areas. So now I'm going to turn it over to Melissa Leinhardt to go through the policy directions.
Thank you, Andrea. For the record, Melissa Leinhardt with your Planning Commission staff. As Andrea stated, we're now considering how to accommodate both inward and outward future growth. So for inward growth, how do we grow inside the urban service area efficiently? Besides the survey data that Andrea just presented, this topic was also discussed in detail at our community meetings in both May and June. And then for the outward growth portion, how and when do we expand outside the urban service area? And we discussed this topic in detail at our community meetings in both June and August. So now let's talk about some inward growth strategies. The first topic we're going to talk about is centers and connections. This topic is presented to you all back in February, I believe, at a workshop. The intent of this idea is to streamline the comprehensive plan amendment process by allowing density and intensity bonuses within certain areas of unincorporated Hillsborough County, essentially directing growth into areas that are both desired and maintainable. Those bonuses would be tied to specific design provisions and required improvements as part of development, meaning there would be a public benefit if someone would choose to use this option. This approach, the word choice, assumes incentive-based. So this would be an option, but not a requirement. Overall, the approach is intended to incentivize growth where the community wants to see it, and that has the existing infrastructure, all the while maintaining the variety of choices that we currently enjoy today in Hillsborough County with urban, suburban, and rural lifestyle options. So what could these changes look like potentially? On the slide, you can see some before and after pictures to provide some context. So the first set of pictures on the top is in Town and Country. This is on Waters Avenue. You can see on the left-hand picture that shows houses at a density of 6 dwelling units per acre. And with a slight uptick in density, you could have some slightly smaller lots with perhaps some sidewalk improvements. The next set of pictures underneath is the USF area, on Fletcher Avenue specifically, where we currently allow 20 units an acre. But with 30 units an acre, the picture that's on the right, you could see some additional improvements and perhaps some more connectivity. Finally, the lower examples in Greater Palm River on 78th Street. There on the left, you see residential at 9 units an acre. But with just a few more units, you could potentially have townhomes or duplexes to provide some more options for housing types. I also wanted to note that the plan also has mixed use categories on the future land use map. And then we also have many community plans that have existing language that would support higher densities. So additionally, the forthcoming map changes slide that I'll go through, we're addressing areas that maybe weren't as supported. So for example, in the survey, we saw some mixed reactions in Brandon, and then we saw less support for areas of South County. So this slide shows the proposed centers and connections map, which is also on our project website. This map will change based on the feedback that we received in the survey from the community. The blue circles are the centers listed in the community plans for their major intersections where increased development could be achieved via a bonus. The blue lines are those connections between the centers, and then the green circles are proposed centers in the coastal high hazard area, or CHHA, or they're areas that are primarily lower in density. While the original methodology and concept called for the green centers in the CHHA and primarily the single family areas with a focus on multimodal improvements, just given the concern of the community and also funding restraints that we're currently experiencing, those centers on the map may be removed in future iterations. So some of them continue to be priority locations or community focal points in the community plans, and it will stay that way. The next slide goes through the MetroQuest survey information that we received for centers and connections. So the survey allowed the public to put a thumbs up, a thumbs down, or a neutral icon on the proposed centers and connections. After analyzing those and the comments that were received in the mapping portion of the survey, Staff noted significantly higher support for concepts in the northern portion of the county within the urban service area. So those are especially places like the university area and East Lake Orient Park. The next version of the proposed map will incorporate edits that take a closer look at the Brandon area, like I mentioned. And again, we did hear some concerns and mixed reactions from the South County area folks, and we're considering some revisions based on those comments. The next topic for inward growth is the topic of transit-oriented development. Essentially, this type of development focuses growth, specifically around fixed guideway transit routes. So that means bus rapid transit, streetcar lines, ferry stations. This often overlaps with our major corridors and centers. It basically encourages mobility options, affordable homes, mixed-use development, that type of thing. Fowler Avenue continues to be studied as a possible facility enhancement that may utilize the proposed policy in the future. And overall, this idea connects people to opportunities. It's also important to note that this is existing policy language in the plan today, and we're refining it, clarifying it, updating it. This next slide is on commercial locational criteria. This may sound familiar to a lot of you because you did see it earlier this year, and Andrea and I were the ones presenting it. At the time we did this, we'll call it CLC for, to speed up on time here. We were hoping to update and improve the language that's currently in the plan today. Ultimately, based on the board's direction back in January, it was folded into the future land use update that we're reporting on today. So the changes proposed before you on screen are a bit more limited in nature than you saw originally, and that's really based on the Board of County Commissioners direction, as well as Senate Bill 250 that Andrea was mentioning that really reduced our scope. Major revisions that are being proposed include adding a new future land use category, which we had shown you earlier, that's neighborhood mixed use 6. We're also proposing to add the context classification map to evaluate appropriate intersections for non-residential development. That was also included when we showed you the updates earlier this year. This map is currently adopted in the mobility section of the comprehensive plan, and it's a map that really marries transportation and land use together. Originally, we had proposed to replace the currently utilized cost affordable map with the context classification map, but based on input that we received from the county attorney's office, based on the Senate bill, we'll be keeping the cost affordable map in the language and then adding the context classification map, which will allow for some additional intersections to be considered for commercial. And I want to stress the word consider, because while we are opening up some more opportunities for some additional non-residential potentially, any rezoning application would still be subject to all of the other policy direction in the comprehensive plan, including but not limited to our compatibility policies and the community plan policies. Lastly, the last bullet talks about adding some clarification language about the CLC, just specifically mentioning the policy direction included in the community plans. That applies today, but we have a special call out and clarification in the language. So that brings us to the outward growth strategies. As part of this holistic approach, we're continuing to focus on the promotion of agriculture. We currently have 3 objectives in the future land use element today, with several policies underneath each, and no major changes are proposed to those policies. We've received some feedback from county staff and we've been working with them. The county's Agricultural Economic Development Council, or AEDC, the Farm Bureau, we've spoken with the Soil and Water Conservation District, and some minor revisions are being proposed to the language just to reflect some current nomenclature and programming. We're also working on some utility extension policies. This specific update is intended to prevent the septic tank clustering that you could see today and address any environmental issues that may exist on a certain site. It also allows water and sewer to be extended if a site was meeting very specific locational, environmental, parcel size criteria, or if a documented environmental hazard exists on site. And we've been coordinating with the Environmental Protection Commission staff on this, as well as county utilities on these policies. So up until now, expansion of the urban service area has really only been through an applicant-driven request. We, as your planning commission staff, and based on the information that Andrea provided to you in the beginning of the presentation, we recognize the need for a more proactive strategy for expansion that is publicly initiated. We've seen some excellent examples in our research with the Plant City Master Plan, counties in Florida like Sarasota, Osceola, Indian River, Marion, some examples that are a little bit beyond like Morgan Hill, California. They've really provided us with some excellent framework to draw from. We know that identifying where we should expand is a very complicated one, and that it will take a lot more time, coordination, public engagement. So today we are looking at criteria to consider for the future. Essentially, we're trying to set a framework in place so that when an urban service area expansion is identified as needed, we have criteria in place to proactively address that growth. So with this effort, we're really asking three major questions. Before we can begin to look at where we should grow, we really need to consider the when, the how, and the what. When is it time to consider expansion? How should we plan for it? What should we look like, or what should we look for in expansion areas? And we realize that planning for growth is very complex. It's going to take a variety of solutions. And we've already talked about a number of ways to handle growth inside the urban service area. So in the next few slides, we're going to go through each of these questions and discuss the potential for growth outside the urban service area. So when is it time to consider expansion? So we'll be evaluating the timing according to population projections, which will help us determine the amount of available developable and redevelopable area. And we'll ensure the availability of land for our homes, our jobs, our daily needs. The next question is how. So how should we plan for expansion? First, we'll develop a master plan that will help us to identify expansion areas. Within this, we'll develop corridor plans specific to the goals of the master plan. Next, we'll commit to engagement with the community to make sure that we've taken into account every aspect in that master plan. We'll also continually review the community plans, coordinate with external agencies, review impact and mobility fees, encourage private infrastructure investment. And within the master plan, we'll also include elements that are specific to traffic circulation, network connectivity, utilities coordination, so drainage, water, sewer, and then preservation of open spaces like parks and wildlife corridors. We'll also include a section for viable funding programs to make sure that the plans are financially implementable. And then lastly, we'll look at what we should do in the expansion areas. We want to make sure that these areas are adjacent to the urban service area, that these areas have access to adequate infrastructure, either now or planning with the capital improvement plan or CIP. We'll look for areas that will optimize access to and delivery from public services. We want to ensure these areas will preserve open space and also promote sustainability. We want to enhance our community plans, so we want to make sure we review those visions and make sure those goals come first. These areas should be within a half a mile of an employment center or some type of commercial economic center, or at least have the ability to create one. I'm so out of order, sorry. The master plan should look at encouraging economic growth and increase access to people's daily goods and services. And these areas especially need to enhance safety throughout the entire community. We saw through the MetroQuest results that in many of these areas where we have rural scale roads and established traffic patterns for travel, we want to make sure if we're going to change that development pattern, that those roadway enhancements, they might be needed, they need to be studied. And again, this is really tied back to those MetroQuest study results regarding the importance of safety. So what's next for the future land use update? Here's a timeline of the future land use update. We're currently working on recommendations with some additional outreach, as Andrea had mentioned, for the fall. We are planning to come back to the Planning Commission as part of the October cycle of plan amendments. So that would be a public hearing in January. And then we are going to be having 2 more scheduled community meetings in November. One is in person and at the Gardenville Recreation Center on November 2nd, and then November 6th is virtual, both starting at 6 p.m. It's important to note that the topics covered in each of these meetings will be the same. These are the same topics, but rather than have a hybrid meeting, we're having a more of a controlled environment, one in person and then one 100% virtual. And then, not to underscore this enough tonight, I just wanted to note that with Senate Bill 250, not allowing more restrictive or burdensome language, we've really had to delay sharing some drafts of the language with the public. We've had to consult with the county attorney's office on the language. We just wanted to ensure that we're meeting the requirements of the new language. So that being said, we should have draft language up on our website before the November community meetings. And last but not least, I wanted to say that well, Andrea and I are the project managers. This goes way beyond the 2 of us. We have had the help we've had from the staff here has been integral, and I know we couldn't have done it without them. So, and this is not even everyone, this is just who we could put on the screen. And a lot of them are here today. So with that, we're here for questions. Any questions and comments? Thank you.
Commissioners, on this item, that was a lot of information. Still chewing it over. I have a question. Obviously, me, you, and Melissa used to be a lot about this. We haven't met and talked about this quite some time. Obviously, there's a lot of things that have gone on in between then and now. I'm wondering, this feels, and obviously we haven't sat down and discussed it yet, but just in your presentation, it feels a lot more pulled back than what we were doing before. Is that a pretty good assumption on my part there?
I would say with the new Senate bill language, we have been forced to pull back on a couple items. And, a lot of the maybe more major changes. I mean, I think the CLC is a great example. That was a 1.5-year study, and it took a lot of time and effort and dedication. We thought we landed in a really good place. We had a lot of back and forth with the community, a lot from the developer community, and again, I thought we were ending at a place where we had more of a collaborative kind of experience. But just again, based on that Senate bill language, we really had to pull back, and then we thought, okay, what are the things that are really not going to be viewed as burdensome or restrictive? And I will say we took a pretty conservative approach to that. Doesn't mean we won't be back in the future.
Yeah, when you say you pulled back because of you're talking about the Senate bill you just referenced.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. About the affordable housing.
No, the language, I mean, I'm not an attorney, I will say that, Tracy, get on the record. But basically the Senate bill, it says that one may not introduce a plan amendment or a comprehensive plan amendment to the text of the language that's could be viewed as more burdensome or restrictive than what's in there today. So that when you look at it through that lens, it really does limit what you can introduce as part of the update. Sure. But still have some good stuff in here. It's just maybe not as robust as we had originally planned.
Yeah. I have well, as Chair Joseph said, it's a lot. I think what's missing is the if slide. The when and the where and the how, but not the if. Because I'm concerned that the community priorities are environmental preservation and hanging on to our remaining rural and green and open space. And I mean, look, we've got RP2 and WVR2, and they are outside the urban service area. So I don't know that we can have it all. And I think that's going to be very difficult. And I also think that, speaking of Senate bills, we need to be very, very careful with doing something that is going to make it difficult for the community to remain involved in because of
what are the numbers? 514. The one that basically removes the ability to challenge local decisions. Right. I don't remember the number off the top of my head. And by my calculations, 55,000 acres of infill is a lot. And infill typically can support higher densities, typically can and does. So, I think you've done a really good job of stressing inward versus outward, which is great. And I think that that's absolutely where we need the focus to be.
I would, those are great comments. I appreciate those. I would just say, as far as the outward growth is concerned, I hear your comments and concerns. You know, having connected open spaces, preservation, sustainability, those are all part of the things that we're looking at for any new growth outside of the urban service area. And from my understanding, again, not an attorney, is that that's new language for the plan. So we can really craft that in a way that benefits the community, as opposed to making changes to existing language. So I think there we're at an advantage because we don't have any language in the plan today that, you know, we do have an urban service area extension language, but it doesn't go to this extent to really address a true master plan to get us something more cohesive, integrated, and that really is more thoughtful and thinks of all the things we need, not just housing.
Yeah, agreed. I think that we've covered that quite well. I'm just still very concerned about checking all those boxes. Understandable. And what can happen if plans move forward against the community's will, or, you know, just because we think it's inconsistent, we're not the final word.
Right. We are planning on coming back to you all for a workshop before we get this in cycle in November. So we'll have a better handle on what the language is. I mean, we're still working on that. It's kind of a work in progress based on the MetroQuest study and the community feedback we're getting. We didn't want to have language already crafted and then come to the community and say, this is it. We want to make sure that they're part of the crafting and that voices are heard. So when we come back to you, we'll be a little bit more solidified. And then of course, you know, we'll have a true red line document when we come back to you all when we're actually in cycle for a public hearing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sure. When we talk about building the urban service area and we call out specifically town and country in this PowerPoint presentation, I think it's interesting as a board, we just think back to last month, what happens when we try to have increased density in some of our urban service area. And think about the number of people that came out in town and country that protested vehemently against added density right next to their housing. So I think it's a double-edged sword. It comes back to my point that I made, fortunately, repeatedly in these meetings. I mean, the urban service area can act as a chokehold on the community. It can do a severe disservice to the community, and all we have to do is look what happened in Portland. It's a perfect case study. They put a growth ring around that community. It can have the opposite effect for what we're trying to drive as planners and as a board. So I think we really need to be careful about that. And the next time we have a density request that comes before us in this body, we have 30, 40, 50 people filling this room, we probably need to take a look at ourselves. And if we're going to continue to drive these types of policies, we need to like man and woman up and approve it, regardless of some of the feedback that we're getting. So I'm as culpable as everyone else on the board because it was a unanimous decision last month, but it's a very specific example of some of the policy decisions that we're making that's going to drive some of the behaviors from the community that we're going to see in this, right? We're going to continue to see a whole bunch of people come in here, push back on developments that are inside the service area because it's adding density next to their existing housing. So I have a few notes here. This is a really great presentation. Thanks for putting it together. So we had 1,500 people change that responded to the survey so far.
1,800.
1,800. So approximately 1.3 million people live in the county. It's about 0.11% population. So how much credence, how much stock are we using from those feedback sessions to drive this? And how much of it is professional planning? How would you talk to me about that process? How we're weighing some of the feedback that we're getting from them very small portion of the community versus maybe a wider community. Want folks who are easy to come in, folks who have different things going on in their lives. So we don't fall into a tyranny or minority type of situation. Can you walk me through that process and how we're weighing some of that feedback?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right that it's a balancing act because we have to look at who took the time to take the survey, what comments they made. I know specifically like for Katrina Corcoran, who worked on the Centers and, or is working on the Centers and Connections initiative, it was very informative and she can pop up maybe and say something a little bit deeper than that. But they really created a lot of data points that are going to help them refine that map. So I think in that instance, it was very helpful. But also we received some really high level guidance about if we received guidance that said people, don't want to expand outside the urban service area under any circumstances whatsoever, which is not what we heard. I think we would have taken that into account. But I think we're between the survey and also balanced with the multiple community meetings that we've had, and we've had emails and all kinds of other types of participation. We also, in addition to the community meetings, we've had something very interesting with this flu update. We've done a project advisory team, call it PAT because we love acronyms. But we've had 3 of those today, and we're adding a 4th, and we're adding 2 more, later this year. And those are really informative. Melissa Z was just the last one. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be there, so maybe she can add a little bit more on that. But those are the people that are really interested in drilling down a little bit more. So they're less, they're not giving you maybe the more like the fluffier answers, or the maybe not fluffy is not the right word, but kind of the wide range or broader topic areas. They're really drilling down. They're asking hard questions. They wanted to talk about mobility fees, and they want to talk about a lot of different topics that we don't necessarily get to delve into when we do MetroQuest surveys or have other public meetings. So I feel like we've heard from a variety of tiers of people in all of those experiences, and we're still in the process of hearing that. So I think we're still in the professional assessment portion that you mentioned. But I'm really hoping that, we keep getting this constructive feedback that we've gotten so far, and that we can come back to you with a refined, Centers and Connections map that takes into account the public's input, but also balances what we as professionals have already put together. And I think, I don't know if you want to come up and say anything, but I from what I have gathered from what you have said in our technical memo that's on the website, that you might want to look at that delves into the MetroQuest survey in much more detail than we covered today for sake of time. But that's really helping them refine that map and dig a little deeper. But again, we're able to retain that professional assessment of where we started. What intersections make the most sense? What do the community plans say? And that kind of thing.
I would just add that, you're spot on with how it's helped us refine the map, but I think that a lot of the things that we're hearing are fairly consistent across the in-person meetings that we're having, the virtual meetings, multiple meetings that we've had that Andrea mentioned. So it's been a very helpful tool, I think, for a broad overview, but I wouldn't say that it's not a sample of the entire county, given the size. It was great participation. But I also think we had that survey that was statistically significant of Hillsborough County, and it's building upon what we've already heard there. Katrina Corcoran, Planning Commission staff, sorry.
I have a few things, it was so much. So sorry if I'm monopolizing time, just tell me to be quiet. With the South County and the Brandon comments that were made, what were some of the feedback or the pushback from the community that was made? I heard we're reassessing some things, but I didn't hear the specifics. So just generally, what types of things are we looking at?
Just looking at the different, there are a lot of intersections and community plan focal points and intersections in those areas. So we were looking at those a little bit more closely, looking at the comments that we received. The general, we had a thumbs up, thumbs down, neutral, looking at how that spreads out, or is it mostly negative in this area? Okay, why? What are they saying? Is there a lack of understanding of what we're proposing in that area? That sort of thing. So especially with South County, some of it was mixed. Brandon, it was mixed. So looking a little bit closer at that, and again, adding that with our professional judgment of, is this the right area? So not just, excluding things just to exclude them, but taking that feedback into consideration. And again, Katrina Corcoran.
The last thing I had was the outward expansion, which obviously was a big topic a few months ago, maybe last year. You guys came from me, and specific to a few things. So Marion and Sarasota County, just in all candor, concern me using them for templates potentially. As someone who develops ground or has in the past. But are two of the most difficult counties in the state outside of Lee to work in from a public standpoint. So, I mean, it's an all candor, it concerns me that we're using those as potential mapping. I would say that privately initiated amendments are for not our enemy. They can tell us where the community is going, what's driving the public right now. Where is it going? We have the opportunity to approve or deny and look at those as a board. So I think just based on the notes, based on some of the previous text prior to the Senate bill coming out, I thought it was overly restrictive. I didn't minority on the board, but I thought it was overly restrictive in terms of what it was laying on the development community and our ability to service the community, what our type of development plan. Prime example, limiting developments within a half mile of an employment center. That eliminates so much of the county when we do that. So I think we need to take a look at that, balance it out a little bit. And other than that, I appreciate the work that's gone into it. It's clearly a lot and it's a big project.
Thank you.
I would echo that Osceola Marion thing. Even Sarasota and Ingram, your picks were really weird to me that I didn't say anything about it. So it's interesting if we're talking about future growth, those sorts of areas. In those areas, they've had historical problems in those sort of areas.
It's one thing to have the urban service area and have call it software, but when we limit the amount of public input into some of the privately initiated amendments, it becomes a hard growth effect. And it limits the developers from even being able to put that application before a body that was appointed by the city councils of the various county and by county commissioners for us to review those things. So, I'm really concerned with limiting the amount of private amendments that we can get. I really am, because it serves as a nice look at what's happening within the community. Developers aren't developing things at whim. They're not going to bring a project to us that isn't going to fill up in the house. And whether we approve it, that remains to be seen. But I do think those should come to us for review in most cases. And that's not the way the language is written at this point. At least the last draft I saw months ago.
So if I could just clarify, I think what Melissa was trying to say is that today in the plan, the only way the only policy that we have is related to how we review a privately initiated amendment.
Right.
That's going to stay. But what we want to add is an approach for the county to initiate a master planning process for an area, let's say along I-4, between the urban service area and Plant City. Let's say they want to do a master planning process for that. We want to outline what that needs to look like, sort of like Plant City did that Northeast Master Plan, and that's been helpful as we've had privately initiated amendments come in, that we have a plan that looked beyond Plant City's boundaries and guides what should go there. So,
The proposed master plans limit the amount of limit a privately initiated amendment before coming. Will it limit it? Keep it from coming to this body? I'm just like spit that out.
I don't know, because I don't know what that master plan is going to say.
Right.
And so
that's my concern.
Understood. Okay, got it. That helps clarify it for me. Thank you. And Diego did the research on those communities, so might be.
He's itching.
Yeah.
Good afternoon again, Diego, Planning Commission staff. There are very few, to answer your comment, or address your comment rather, there are very few communities in Florida that have an expansion, talk about expansion. Majority of them do not. They don't want to expand or have any way of expanding or are planning to expand anytime or in a proactive manner. So Sarasota is one, River County. I looked outside of the state for some other examples. However, expansion in many of those examples are addressed at the state level, not at the local city or county level. I did find one, a couple out in California. The reason they're included is because they have more of an interlocal agreement between the local communities and the county that discuss a mutual relationship and working together to look at the best way to expand the urban service area. So that's why those various communities were looked at for similarities, differences, and how and which way is the best way to approach such an issue when it comes to lighting within Hillsborough County.
Discussion items, questions, comments? Speeches from commissioners? Seeing anyone moving, so I'll let it go once, twice. All gone, close the public comment on this item. Thank you for your presentation. We'll move on to the next item on our agenda.
Thank you.
Oh, here we are, we're at the agenda, wow. All right, 5, Executive Director's Report. And the presenter is Melissa Sornita.
Good evening, Melissa Zornita, Executive Director. At your seats at the old dais was my report. If it didn't travel with you, we'll get you a copy of it. Just a couple of real quick highlights, as I know we're running short on time. We concluded in July our Flip Junior program with the Tampa Heights and Town and Country communities. Had a couple of planning commissioners participate in that and appreciate your time and support of that program. We had a very successful Valrico Community Plan open house over a couple of nights, and as well as a virtual open house. Jay's team got a great response to that. I was invited to a meeting with Commissioner Myers and Congresswoman Castor about different grant applications for federal funding, particularly aimed at the Palm River community, looking to help implement the community plan update that's occurring in that area. I was requested to do an interview for the Heart Governance and Operation Management Analysis that DOT is doing. Just in case you see my opinions of Heart somewhere, that's that. I was asked to give them. We've had a number of outreach meetings on both the county plan update as well as the Tampa Future Land Use Assessment, which I believe you'll have a presentation on next month. And then we've had a number of meetings related to the hiring of the TPO Executive Director. The TPO voted on 3 candidates that will be moved forward to final interviews in September with the full board. I attached to my report editorial that I was offered the opportunity to write in the Tampa Bay Times as part of my participation in a Spotlight on Tampa Bay event on Wednesday in St. Petersburg. I, as well as former Mayor Bob Buckhorn, former Senator Jeff Brandes, and one of their real estate reporters will be discussing the future of housing in Tampa Bay. So that's what my editorial is about. Wanted to share it with you, so in case you hadn't seen it in the news clippings. We do need an appointee to the City of Tampa Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. Planning Commissioner Rodriguez has fulfilled his 2 terms on that board, and the representative to that committee has to be from the City of Tampa. So that means, and Commissioner Bernstein's not here again, but I don't know, Commissioner Kress, Commissioner Cardenas, if either one of you would be
already sitting on the river board committee, and it's been hard for me to get to the meeting, so
okay.
I don't want to set up for something else that I don't feel like it's fully bill is supposed to.
Understood.
Could we talk offline about what the time frame is and all of that?
Absolutely, yes. Mr. Rodriguez can definitely tell you all about what's involved in the meetings, sure. And then I also wanted to let you all know that we sent a letter to DOT on their Fowler PD&E study, supporting 2 of the alternatives that included higher frequency transit lanes. A similar letter was also sent by the TPO, and encouraging them to align their context classification of the roadway with where we see the vision study that we're doing heading, which is towards a more urban classification of the road as opposed to a more suburban classification. lastly, your meeting in September, we do have, it's an error. It says Plant City and Temple Terrace on here. We have one item from the county that was continued to your September meeting, and there are two items on the hearing tonight that need to be continued to the September meeting. We will not have any Plant City or Temple Terrace items. And then there are updates on actions from the local governments. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I just, thank you, Chair. I was looking at the report and, you know, I'm really looking forward to those FEMA flood maps coming on because it looks like, and we voted for the report too, but that property that was 80% within a flood zone in Valrico was going to pay a top of that. So it's unfortunate. It's just going to create a larger, you know, risk of flood in that area. But a comment about that. That's all.
Yeah, I should share, if we have time, that one of the things that was a big factor in their decision on that plan amendment was the Live Local Act, which that property is currently zoned for commercial. So the applicant could presented that they could either do what the plan amendment allowed, or they could go outside of the plan amendment and the zoning process. And if they included 40% affordable housing, could get up to 35 units per acre, utilizing this Live Local Act. So it's sort of a very real example of how that is being leveraged in the process. And the Board of County Commissioners does have a super majority requirement to approve any plan amendment. So it was a 5-2 vote.
Comments or questions? Okay, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
We will move on to our next item of business, other business, chair's business. I have none. Old business. I don't think there was any. New business. Does anybody have any new business? No. All right. Committee reports. Yes.
Yes, the City of Tampa Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, we had that on July 19th, received an update of all the activities of the Housing and Community Development Division of the city, and received an update on various projects that are going on. Overall, they gave us on over 400 new multifamily units that are under construction, coming online, as well as a new project for Funland Drive-In site on 22nd Street, or excuse me, on Hillsborough on 2nd Street, which will be 354 units, and that will be part of the community plan trust when that gets established. It's kind of a some affordable housing. Cover a lot of stuff, and I'll be happy to share with any commissioner offline about time commitment. It's not that bad, but you're exposed to a lot of development and development finance issues. It's been a great experience. I'm kind of disappointed that I turned down. Great organization. Thanks.
All right. Any other reports from anyone? No. Seeing none, then I will remind everyone that mics don't shut off when the meeting's over, so not when it meets in the room. But with that, our meeting is adjourned, and we will see you at what?
5:45?
5:45 for our public hearings.
We reconvene on the 26th floor.
Yeah,
On the 26th floor. I didn't understand those of you. So meeting adjourned.